Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine Sthapakaya Cha Dharmasya Sarva Dharma Swarupine Avataro Barishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagat Gurum Padapadme Tvayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhur. Welcome everybody to the 6th class of Raja Yoga, and in today's class we're going to discuss chapter 3 of Raja Yoga. It's going to be a discussion on Pranayama. It's actually going to be a deep dive into Swamiji's Pranayama. Now, normally when we mention the idea of Pranayama in our order, if you tell that to other monks or devotees, their first reaction would be, no, don't practice too much. Too much breathing is not good for you. Mata pagla hoye jabe. One can go mad. Or, secondly, one can become overly body conscious. The same myths and misconceptions that we talked about when we discussed asana last week. In fact, let's just quickly review what the main points were in asana before we go to pranayama. Again, let's step back a little bit. Why is Swamiji taking this in this direction? It's Ashtanga Yoga, the eightfold yoga path, which eventually leads to Samadhi. Can anyone recall what the 8 steps are? First are yama and niyama, which are the ethical disciplines. Next is asana, which we discussed last week. So if you think about it from a practical perspective, this eightfold step is very practical, because if we're not acting ethically, if we're trying to do harm to others, or if we misbehave with others, in that state we cannot really meditate. However we may try, whatever asanas and breathing and concentration we do, we won't really feel peace. We'll feel a constant badgering of the heart and mind. That's why first is these ethical disciplines. Next, after you get that, leads to that, what we said, asana. I think I told you that asana, Swamiji says it means not only sitting, but posture. So last week's class, or 2 weeks ago, we showed the posture in sitting and standing of Swami Vivekananda, Holy Mother, and Sri Ramakrishna. And what did you notice about their posture? It was straight, exactly, it was straight. In fact, what the Gita says is that the top of the neck, the top of the head, the neck, and the back should be aligned in a straight line. In addition to that, Swamiji mentioned that if you have proper posture through asana, new channels in the mind, in the brain will be created. And we talked about 2 weeks ago how unique a perspective that was, because the laws of neuroplasticity were not known yet till almost 100 years later from when Swamiji spoke. Same thing, the EEG, which measures alpha, theta, delta, and beta waves, that was not known yet. And then I showed many different types of empirical studies which show that by keeping straight posture, one is more likely to have a positive self-esteem, retrieve positive memories in a state of anxiety, think more clearly. This is at the cognitive level. At the willing level, one is more likely to have more determination than if we're slouching. And finally, at the affectative level, at the feeling level, one is more likely to be empathetic towards others. These were studies, empirical studies that were done by reputable journals. Then the question, one scientist asked me, in fact, that scientist is my father. He asked, but maybe it is that maybe people who are predisposed to depression, low self-esteem, mental health problems, selfishness, maybe they're more likely to be slouchers, slouching the back. But then I showed last week empirical studies that even if you have the tendency to slouch, you can intervene positive posture, and that does lead to an increase in test performance, clarity of mind, empathy of heart. So it is something, if we're not born with it, that can be artificially imposed. Now today we're going to talk about chapter 3. Again, one final point. Good posture, there is also a physiological reason. Does anyone recall what that is? When one is straight, what happens then? You can take deep breaths. Deep breaths. Have you ever noticed, a lot of us do this. We have our mobile phone. How many of us do this here or online? And when we have our mobile phones, we're slouching. We become slouchers. At that time, what is our breathing like? It's very shallow. So when you keep straight posture, why I'm saying this, asana leads to pranayama. Then you can fully breathe in, the diaphragm gets contracted, then the oxygen comes in, the alveoli sac takes the oxygen to the different parts of the brain and different parts of the body, including the prefrontal cortex, which is where the executive control and planning of the brain takes place. And it also takes away the carbon dioxide when we breathe out. So this is the physiological reason of how asana leads to breathing, pranayama. So all the things that we mentioned about asana and posture, how it creates good channels in the brain, the same thing can be applied to pranayama. Now, finally, when we do take these deep breaths, by having the oxygen go to the different parts of the brain, it does one other thing. I'm just talking about from a physiological, neurological level. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the system that brings homeostasis to the body. It regulates the heart rate variability. And it deactivates what we call the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. Someone added a third quality, freeze. Fight or freeze in certain cases. So with that, we're going to start with chapter 3. Again, we're going to go through Swami Vivekananda's own words. I learned this when I was at Harvard, during this monastic fellowship at Harvard Divinity School. Professor Francis Clooney, an esteemed professor there, he always pushed us, and other professors did too. Go beyond the text. Don't be afraid to challenge the author if something does not make sense to you. Oftentimes when we read Swami Vivekananda's words, we just accept it. We don't apply our critical faculty. But even Swamiji, what did he do when he met Ramakrishna? He applied the full breadth and strength and depth of his critical faculty towards anything Ramakrishna said. Same thing with Sister Nivedita. When she met Swamiji, she did the same thing. So we're going to do that today. We're going to see how logical of a thinker Swamiji is. He doesn't speak from a top down. He guides us and he asks questions. So note the logic in which he speaks, the logical progression. He starts from the vast, from the breadth, the cosmic, and he goes down to the individual level, making it real for us. In other words, he reconciles the ideal with the real. Another thing that he does that we can learn from, even though he's had all types of intuitive experiences, remember when in the first class, when I mentioned who was Swami Vivekananda's audience here, who was he speaking to? The leading scientists, psychologists, neuroscientists, agnostics, seekers, and faith healers. We're going to see how he aligns the teachings of Raja Yoga with the leading scientific doctrines of the time in 1894. Let's begin. So Swamiji begins, and I'll just do the reading and then in between raise some questions. Swamiji begins, Pranayama is not, as many think, something about breath. Breath indeed has very little to do with it, if anything. Again, this is the same objection that we have today. When we even think of pranayama, let's be honest, what do we usually think of? Yes, breath. Yeah. But it has little, if anything, to do with it. The same thing at that time. Breathing is only one of the many exercises through which we get to the real pranayama. So now the question, what is the real pranayama? Pranayama means the control of prana. So in Sanskrit, this prana, vital energy, yama means control, and the akara, ayama means special control, restraint. According to the philosophers of India, the whole universe is composed of two materials, one of which they call Akasha. It is the omnipresent, all-penetrating existence. Everything that has form, everything that is the result of combination, is evolved out of this Akasha. It is the Akasha that becomes the air, that becomes the liquid, that becomes the solids. It is the Akasha that becomes the sun, the earth, the moon, the stars, the comets. It is the Akasha that becomes the human body, the animal body, the plants, every form that we see, everything that can be sensed, everything that exists. So let's just take a step back right now. Where is Swamiji actually getting this idea of Akasha from? Secondly, I gave a class about a month ago. It was called, The Importance of Sound in Life and Death. Now, in the traditional yogic Sankhya philosophy, Akasha is not the substratum, not the first evolute of the universe. What is it? We talked about it. It's just a real quick review of this technical subject. In Sankhya Yoga philosophy, we start with Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha comes into slight proximity with Prakriti, then like in iron and the magnet filings, then Prakriti begins to realign itself. From that, it goes to this Buddhi, Ahamkara. Ahamkara has a Sattvika Ahamkara and a Tamasika Ahamkara. The Sattvika Ahamkara is the 5 Gyanendriyas and the 5 Karmendriyas. Why are they Sattvika? Because the eyes, the nose, the ears, they all have the capacity to reveal knowledge, light. Light is associated with Sattvika. Now, from the Tamasika Ahankara comes the different tanmatras. We talked about the tanmatras before, the different elements. And from there, like say Shabda. Shabda is one of the tanmatras. From Shabda comes Akasha. We explained it. Where does sound take place? Can sound take place in a vacuum? No. In order for sound to take place, you need air molecules, and you need friction between the air molecules. So this is what Sankhya and Yoga talk about when they speak about this Sankhya Yoga philosophy. That's what Akasha is. But here Swamiji is talking about Akasha as the substratum, the first evolute, the material body of the universe, seen and unseen. So where is he getting this from? It's not in Vedanta. Vedanta says there is no material. It's this nimitta karana. It comes from Maya in Vedanta Sarda. And that's all nothing but a projection. In Sankhya, they say Prakriti and Purusha, and Prakriti is composed of the 3 gunas. So where does this come from? So I just did a little research, and I found that in the Taittiriya Upanishad, it talks about Akasha as the first evolute, 2.1.1. Etasmat Atmana Akashaha Sambhutaha. From the Atman arises the first evolute, Akasha. And again in the Chandogya Upanishad, 7.12.1, it talks about Akasha as the ultimate substratum. That's just the background. So let's continue. Akasha cannot be perceived. It is so subtle that it is beyond all ordinary perception. It can only be seen when it has become gross, has taken form. At the beginning of creation, there is only this Akasha. At the end of the cycle, the solids, the liquids, and the gases all melt into the Akasha again. And the next creation similarly proceeds out of this Akasha. What's an example of this? Is anybody here a chemistry major? Gaudik Maharaj, did you do chemistry? No, okay, just checking. What's an example of this? What if I said H2O? Can we proceed? H2O consists of hydrogen and oxygen. So with our eyes, with any of our 5 Gyanendriyas, can we perceive oxygen or hydrogen? Not separately. But what happens when they come together? So from the subtle becomes the gross, water. Same thing with Akasha. When the subtle becomes gross, then we can perceive it. So at the end of the cycle, the solids, the liquids, and the gases all melt into the Akasha again. And the next creation similarly proceeds out of this Akasha. Now Swamiji raises the question, so this Akasha is this omnipresent material, but how does this come into manifest name and form? Well, but by what power is this Akasha manufactured into this universe? See how logical Swamiji is. He raises the question before it comes to our mind. He comes to our level. By the power of Prana. Just as Akasha is the infinite, omnipresent material of this universe, so is this Prana, the infinite, omnipresent, manifesting power of this universe. Again, this word Prana, where does this come from? We normally think of Prana as life's force. That's what we normally think of Prana. So where is Swamiji getting this term from? It's not in the Sankhya Yoga philosophy. I don't even find it in Vedanta. So I did a little research on that. And that is in the Kathopanishad, 2.3.2. Yat idam kim cha jagat sarvam prana ejati nishritam. So yat idam kim cha jagat, all that moves in this universe, prana ejati nishritam. Ejati is born. This is all born from prana. So by the power of prana, just as Akasha is the infinite, omnipresent material of this universe, so is this prana, the infinite, omnipresent, manifesting power of this universe. At the beginning and at the end of a cycle, everything becomes Akasha, and all the forces that are in the universe resolve back into the prana. In the next cycle, out of this prana is evolved everything that we call energy, everything that we call force. He's using these words, energy and force. We'll get into this. I was looking in 1894, still one of the leading physics theories at that time was the conservation of energy. It is only in 1905 that Einstein's E equal mc squared, energy is equivalent to matter times the speed of light squared. That came in 1905, 11 years later from this talk. It is the prana that is manifesting as motion. It is the prana that is manifesting as gravitation, as magnetism. What is Swamiji doing again? He's talking about the prana at the cosmic level, taking it to the universe level. It is the prana that is manifesting as the actions of the body, as the nerve currents, as thought force. Now he's coming to the individual level. From thought down to the lowest force, everything is but the manifestation of prana, the sum total of all forces in the universe, mental or physical, when resolved back to their original state, is called prana. And then he cites the Nashadya Suktam, when there was neither ought nor not, when darkness was covering darkness, what existed then? That Akasha without motion. The physical motion of the prana was stopped, but it existed all the same. So Swamiji is talking about this relationship between Akasha and prana. And then let's just continue to the middle of this. The knowledge and control of this prana is really what is meant by pranayama. So it's not just control of breath. It's this knowledge and control. So why is knowledge important? Why does he not just say control? Why is knowledge important? So say that you have water. Now, if you want to make the water hot, you need to boil it, you need to add fire to it, but that is not necessarily possible without this fire. So the knowledge that fire makes the water hot, then you can add fire or boil it. Same thing, we should have the knowledge how prana works, its relation with Akasha. And what happens if we understand this power, what prana really is, not just breath, what is meant by pranayama? This opens to us the door to almost unlimited power. Suppose, for instance, a man understood that the prana perfectly and could control it. What power on earth would not be his? Now he's going to be doing something interesting. He's going to be talking about the powers of prana. And it's interesting because if you look at it, in the Yoga Sutras and Sankhya, we do have Ishvara there. Ishvara is a Vishesha Purushaha. We're all Purushas, but Ishvara in the Yoga Sutras 1.24 is a special type of Purusha, not subject to karma and not subject to Maya. And it has ultimate power. It's Sarvagya. It's all-knowing. It's Sarva Shakti. It's all-powerful. So what he's actually doing here, he's giving a logical explanation for Ishvara. In any tradition, Bhakti tradition, Vedanta tradition, Yoga tradition, how does Ishvara get that power over this universe? Is that clear? Ishvara just applies this power of prana. He would be able to move the sun and stars out of their places, to control everything in the universe, from the atoms to the biggest suns, because he would control the prana. This is the end and aim of pranayama. So that's the end and aim of pranayama, to get this power. When the yogi becomes perfect, there will be nothing in nature not under his control. If he orders the gods or the souls of the departed to come, they will come at his bidding. All the forces of nature will obey him as slaves. So this raises like a little bit of a contradiction. What's the contradiction here? In Vedanta and Yoga, they say that there can only be one Ishvara. Otherwise, what will happen if I'm a god, Gauri Kumaraj is a god, you're all gods, so you feel like moving the sun one way, I feel like moving it another way. So there will be chaos in the universe. So what do we do about that then? So that will cause chaos. So actually, this power is available to everybody, but the only one who has the capacity or access to this power at the universal level, at the cosmic level, is Ishvara. Is that clear? We don't have the power to that. Now, you might meet some great souls, maybe your guru, maybe they have this to a certain extent. Maybe they can read your mind, my mind. That's to a certain sphere, but that's not over the entire universe. Okay. Now he goes on, one peculiarity of the Hindu mind is that it always inquires for the last possible generalization, leaving the details to be worked out afterwards. The question is raised in the Vedas, what is that knowing with which we know everything? Okay, let's just go on. So what he's basically talking about here is the deductive. By knowing the individual, you can arrive at the general. Otherwise, he said, if a man wants to know this universe bit by bit, he must know every individual grain of sand, which means infinite time. He cannot know all of them. This concept of, in yoga, sarvagyan, omniscience. How is it possible that a yogi, God even, can acquire that power? Does he have to know each and every single fact? So he's saying no. The yogi said that behind this particular manifestation, there is a generalization. Behind all particular ideas stands a generalized and abstract principle. Grasp it, and you have grasped everything. Just as this whole universe has been generalized into the Vedas and into that one absolute existence, and he who has grasped that existence has grasped the whole universe. So all forces have been generalized into this prana. So now he's taking it from the cosmic to the individual level. And he who has grasped the prana has grasped all the forces of the universe, mental or physical. He who has controlled the prana has controlled his own mind and all the minds that exist. He who has controlled the prana has controlled his body and all the bodies that exist. So how to control the prana is the one idea. So it's interesting that in this time that we're living in, that he brings this up. He who has controlled this one prana controls all the pranas of the entire universe. Because what I see right now, and this is corroborated by science, that we're all struggling just to control, not being controlled by our own mobile phone. How the phone is controlling us. Even when I was in Harvard, I was sitting in a class with undergraduate students. And one of our good professors, best professors there, Steven Pinker, he's giving this wonderful talk on rationality. So everyone's listening very absorbed. These are probably the best minds, some of the best minds in the entire world. But you'll see a few, they'll be scrolling through their tablet, their mobile phone. It's true. You know the attention span in the last 15 years has reduced by like 10 or 15 seconds. So this is becoming a real problem. It's affecting us physiologically, psychologically, mentally, physically. It causes bad posture, shallow breathing, all these things. So it's nice to think Swamiji puts this, yes, you can control the entire universe, but if we can just not be controlled by our phone, let's start with that. That's the first thing. So, and prana is going to help us with that. How to control the prana is the one idea of pranayama. And again, when we think about this, rather than thinking of these external things, if we can think about what are some of the problems that we face, that we see our children, the young people facing, everybody, mental health depression, how to just control the mental health problems, which is becoming a very, something, it's burgeoning in Western and in Indian society. All the trainings and exercises in this regard are for that one end. Each man, each human being must begin where he stands, must learn how to control the things that are nearest to him. This is so hard. You know why this is so hard? Because we never think of controlling our own minds. If we're a parent, we think of controlling our children. If we're a mahanta, we think of controlling our inmates. Just a joke. And if we're an inmate, we think of controlling the mahanta. We're always trying to control the other. So the idea to even look inward, that's how I feel that we get deluded by Maya. We don't even acknowledge that. Because we don't acknowledge that, we lack something called, and what Swamiji is indirectly referring to, accurate self-assessment. What does that mean, accurate self-assessment? It means okay, I hear these ideas of Advaita Vedanta, great. Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma, everything is Brahman. And yet, I listen to this wonderful lecture, and I go home, I yell at my kids, I yell at my wife, I yell at everybody, and the monster comes out at that time, like a Rakshasa, like a demon. Where did that God go that was listening to this lecture? Same thing, how to reconcile the ideal with the real. What that means, what Dr. Carol Dweck, who wrote this wonderful book, The Growth Mindset, talks about, accurate self-knowledge. I know where I stand right now. This is the ideal, but I can only take one step from where I am right now. And that is what Swamiji means. Each man must begin where he stands, must learn how to control the things that are nearest to him. What are the things nearest to him? Does Swamiji mean our children, our parents? Is that what he means? No. What does he mean? Huh? It's just the obvious question. What do you think he means? Our own mind. Even we would debate how much of that is under our control, but nonetheless, that's what we can start with. Okay, that's right. That's right. Well, we'll get back to that in that. Each man must learn where he stands. The body is very near to us, nearer than anything in this external universe, and this mind is the nearest of all. The prana which is working this mind and body is the nearest to all of us, to all the prana in this universe. It's funny, just one quick side note. I have a really good friend. He used to get worked up about everything. He's in Kolkata. He's a philosopher, master's PhD in philosophy. And he would get worked up about everything, about the educational system, about the government, about everyone. Then one day what happened, he broke his leg. And when he broke his leg, he said the next day, everything just kind of came out of existence. And his whole world just boiled down to him and his leg. And when his leg would get healed again. So like that, something happens, and then what's closest to us? Our own body, our own mind. The prana, which is this little wave of the prana, which represents our own energies, mental and physical, is the nearest to us of all the waves of the infinite ocean of prana. If we can succeed in controlling that little wave, then alone can we hope to control the whole of prana. So you see how Swamiji beautifully, he starts with Akasha prana, and how prana manufactures Akasha to make this entire universe. Then he goes down and down and down to the individual. And then the individual, if the individual can just control our own prana, that is enough. The yogi who does this gains perfection. No longer is he under any power. He becomes almost, the key word is almost almighty, almost all-knowing. Why is he saying the word almost? Because there's only one Ishvara, not two Ishvara. You may say Aham Brahmasmi, but not in the Suguna Brahma sense, not as God. There's only one God, personal God. We see sects in every country who have attempted this control of prana. You also see Swamiji, up to now he was addressing, what audience was he addressing when he was talking about Akasha, the creation of the universe? He was talking about matter, energy. Who was he addressing then? Scientist, physicist at that time. Now he's addressing another audience we talked about. These are the mind healers, faith healers, spiritualists. They all believe, they're kind of called like quack. They believe that you can get healed through mind, through prayer, through mind alone. And that was a big cottage industry at that time. It came about because people lost faith in religion. Many people lost faith in religion because of the advent of science. Darwinism and science technology, it really offended the sensibilities of religion. So people felt that religion is not enough anymore. What's going to get me good health? So that these types of, you can pray, that there's seers and there's spirits that you can contact. Through your own positive thinking, you can heal yourselves. These types of people, these mind healers, faith healers. Swamiji continues, and if we examine these different bodies, we shall find at the back of each of this control of the prana, whether they know it or not. If you boil all their theories down, the residuum will be that. It is the one and the same force they are manipulating, only unknowingly. So what they're doing unknowingly, we want to do consciously. This is the end of pranayama. Let's continue. The prana is the vital force in every being. Thought is the finest and highest action of prana. Thought, again, as we see, is not all. So now let's address the state of psychology in the late 19th century. Can anyone tell what the state of, who was the big psychologist at that time? Who had most influence at the end of the 19th century? Sigmund Freud. And what did he come up with at that time? His great contribution was this idea of the unconscious mind. He stratified the mind, the unconscious mind and the conscious mind. And he talked about also superconscious mind. So this unconscious mind, he said that this is where all these complexes formed. What we say in the Yoga Sutras are kleshas, pain bodies. But the difference is that Western philosophy and Western psychology see this mind, see this life as what? This one birth. This is all. Whereas in yoga, we see millions and millions of births. And all those births, at least they have all these impressions. So there's an endless amount of impressions, pain bodies, complexes, what you call klishta vrittis in our unconscious. Whereas Freud says it's only formed at birth. He called it the Oedipus complexes. So many complexes come from childhood. Let's continue. So Swamiji, look at the language he's using now. Thought, again, as we see, is not all. There is also what we call instinct or unconscious thought, the lowest plane of action. If a mosquito stings us, our hand will strike it automatically, instinctively. This action is one expression of thought. So this is at the unconscious level. All reflex actions of the body belong to this plane of thought. There is again the other plane of thought, the conscious. So again, you see Swamiji beautifully, whoever he is addressing, he uses their language. This was the modern language of that time of psychology. In a letter to Sister Nivedita, Sister Nivedita wrote this. She said Swamiji told her, you see, Sister Nivedita, during the plague in Kolkata, I believe in 1898 or 1899, they drafted a plague manifesto, and she was risking her own life, and not only serving the people, speaking with them. Her Bengali was broken, but she was speaking with them, and they connected with her. Swamiji, hearing this, was very pleased. He said, this is what Thakur taught me. Speak to everybody in their language. So Nivedita did that. Swamiji did that. Swamiji is doing that right here. Whether it's the scientist earlier, he's talking about force and matter, conservation of energy was the potent thing at that time. Now he's addressing the psychologist. So he's addressing the unconscious, conscious, and superconscious plane. There's the other plane of thought, the conscious. I reason, I judge, I think, I see the pros and cons of certain things, yet that is not all. We know that reason is limited. Reason can only go to a certain extent. Beyond that, it cannot reach. Now he's going, what's the speciality? Remember what he's said again and again in Raja Yoga, what we've read so far? How long can man live upon words, man and women, human beings live upon words alone, upon doctrines alone? We have to have some type of experience. Now he's going to explain where that experience is in the mind. So, yet at the same time we find the circle, reason can only go to a certain extent. Beyond that, it cannot reach. The circle within it, which it runs, is very, very limited indeed. And what is that reason limited to? Our five senses. Yet at the same time, we find facts rush into this circle. Like the coming of comets, certain things come into this circle. It is certain they come from outside the limit, although our reason cannot go beyond. The causes of the phenomena intruding themselves in this small unit are outside of this limit. The mind can exist on a still higher plane, the superconscious. When the mind has attained to that state which is called Samadhi, perfect concentration, superconsciousness, it goes beyond the limits of reason and comes face to face with facts which no instinct or reason can ever know. You know, William James, he was inspired. He was in Harvard, and I think the first talk I showed his house, and Swami Vivekananda visited his house. So he there talked about, he wrote a book, Varieties of Religious Experience, and he said that was based on his inspiration of Raja Yoga. All manipulations of the subtle forces of the body, the different manifestations of prana, if trained, give a push to the mind, help it to go up higher and become superconscious from where it acts. So he's now giving a logical explanation for the state of Samadhi. In this universe, there is one continuous substance on every plane of existence. What is Swamiji referring to here? What was the theory of physics at that time? The atomic theory. That it was developed in the early 1800s, but still it was even vogue during that time, during the late 1800s. That this universe is composed of atoms. And that still has not changed. It has just become finer. Physically, this universe is one. There is no difference between the sun and you. Now he's addressing the physicist. The scientist will tell you it is only a fiction to say the contrary. There is no real difference between the table and me. The table is one point in the mass of matter, and I another point. Each form represents, as it were, one whirlpool in the infinite ocean of matter, of which not one is constant. So what is the universe? What is this idea of this conservation of energy? What does that say? The energy in this universe, whether it's potential or kinetic, manifesting, it's always constant. It's always constant. It's just changing form, but it's always constant. Just so he's giving not a spiritual explanation, he's giving a explanation from the physicist's point of view at that time. Just as in a rushing stream there may be millions of whirlpools, the water in each one of which is different every moment, turning round and round for a few seconds, and then passing out, replaced by a fresh quantity. So the whole universe is one constantly changing mass of matter in which all forms of existence are so many whirlpools. A mass of matter enters into one whirlpool, say a human body, stays there for a period, becomes changed, and goes out into another, say an animal body this time, from which again after a few years it enters into another whirlpool called a lump of mineral. And this is actually true. He's not saying this from the spiritual point of view. In Vedanta yoga, what do we say that happens at the time of death? This linga sharira, this subtle body leaves the body, and it goes, and after some time it looks for a new body to assume birth again, based on its tendencies and samskaras. But what Swamiji is talking about here, even when the human body is completely burnt, is it completely gone? What remains after the human body is burnt? Atoms, cells, some minerals, oxygen, carbon dioxide, nickel. There are different elements that remain even after death, right? After the body is done, but still these get distributed into the atmosphere. And then they also get eaten by plants. They go by photosynthesis. Plants get eaten, absorbed into the atmosphere, into plants. Animals or whatever eats the plants. So it gets reproduced again. This is the explanation that Swami Vivekananda is giving here. It enters into another whirlpool called a lump of mineral. It is a constant change. Not one body is constant. There is no such thing as my body or your body, except in words. Of the one huge mass of matter, one point is called a moon, another a sun, another a man, another the earth, another a plant, another a mineral. So Swamiji was up to date of physics, of science this time. So it is with the mind. Matter is represented by the ether. When the action of prana is most subtle, this very ether in the finer state of vibration will represent the mind. And there it will still be one unbroken mass. If you can simply get to that subtle vibration, you will see and feel that the whole universe is composed of subtle vibrations. You hear Swamiji is now again referring to science. He's talking about subtle vibrations. He saw this many times with Ramakrishna, that he would go into different states of samadhi. What I'm just emphasizing is how Swamiji always uses science when he's making his points. Now he refers to an experiment that took place in the early 19th century. Sometimes certain drugs have the power to take us, while as yet in the senses to that condition. Many of you may remember the celebrated experiment of Sir Humphrey Davy when the laughing gas overpowered him. How during the lecture he remained stupefied, and after that he said that the whole universe was made up of ideas. I looked this up actually about Sir Humphrey Davy. And it's true that he said this, he noted in his journal the whole universe was made up of ideas. But science did not really emphasize that point. That actually inspired further Western poets like this Coleridge, Wordsworth. That's why they also experimented with some drugs. And through that they got some types of exposure to different types of realities. And from that they wrote poetry. Swamiji did not deny that. See, that's the beauty of Swami Vivekananda. He says, yes, you can also attain this through these means, but they will not be permanent. We have the same question today. One Ramdas, one Western, he took, say, some type of mushrooms. So many of that, they are exposed to something, whether spirituality or another realm of dimension, and they get inspired by that. So Vedanta does not deny that, but it's not permanent, and it's not the whole. For the time being, as it were, the gross vibrations had ceased, and only the subtle vibrations, which he called ideas, were present to him. He could only see the subtle vibrations round him. Everything had become thought. The whole universe was an ocean of thought. He and everyone else had become little thought whirlpools. I'm going to conclude with this. Who else had this experience, yet at a much deeper state? Ramakrishna. It's in the Lila Prasanga. Swami Chidekananda talks about it, that Ramakrishna at one state, he saw this universe as nothing but the realm of ideas. He no longer saw this nama rupa. But in some philosophies you say that beyond this nama rupa, you go from the gross, this is all subtle. Beyond that there's more subtle and subtle. And then there's like a seed, before the universe merges back into its causal state, there's like these seeds. Each seed has a different blueprint for a table, a chair. It's like a cosmic blueprint. And you have these small, tiny seeds that manifest in this universe. So Ramakrishna mentioned that he called that, I don't know in Bengali, but Swami Chidekananda called that the subtle realm of ideas. So these different planes of existence are there. And see what Swamiji is doing? He's explaining this aspect of Samadhi to scientists without calling it Samadhi. He's going down to their level. See? When I was in Harvard, I mentioned this, you can look him up, his Dr. Steven Pinker, one of the most famous teachers. He's a rationalist in Harvard. There he gave a course on rationality. I attended that course. And coincidentally, that course was in Xavier Hall, room 113, where Swami Vivekananda had actually spoken. So one day they arranged a talk between the spiritual personality Sadhguru and Steven Pinker. And Sadhguru, he spoke, and it's neither good or bad, I'm just what he spoke. He spoke from his own spiritual experiences. So Steven Pinker, there was not a meeting of minds. Steven Pinker was speaking from the standpoint of rationality. Sadhguru was speaking from the standpoint of his own spiritual experiences. See the beauty of Swami Vivekananda? He's had every type of spiritual experience. It's been shown, he had Nirvikalpa Samadhi before this. It's in his life. But what does he do? He equates everything to the latest theories of science. He knows the theories of science better than the scientists themselves. You see, that's the thing we say. That's what a teacher does. That's what Swamiji says. He speaks to them in their own language. So I just want everyone, all of us, we can note this point. He speaks to the psychologist in his own language. He speaks to the physicist in his own language. He speaks to the faith healers in their own language. And he speaks to anyone in their own language. And starts from there. Let's conclude almost. Okay. Even in manifested motion, there is only one unity. These facts can no more be denied. Modern physics also has demonstrated that the sum total of the energies in the universe is the same throughout. What is this again? What is this theory called? The conservation of energy. Conservation of energy at that time. Energy is this constant throughout. It becomes potential, toned down, and calmed. And next it comes out manifested as all these various forces. See, he's beautifully linking physics with Sankhya cosmology. Again it goes back to the quiet state, and again it manifests. Thus it goes on evolving and involving through eternity. The control of this prana, as before stated, what is called Pranayama. And just one more. The most obvious manifestation of this prana is in the... So now, after going through this nice, addressing the physicists, the different scientists, he now takes it back to what? The individual. The most obvious manifestation of this prana in the human body is the motion of lungs. We'll stop there. Again, he takes it. So what can we do? What do we do with all this knowledge? It starts with us. It starts with the practice of breathing. Okay, it's 6:55. We have 5 minutes left. So if you have the microphone, we can first take any questions of the audience here, and then if anyone has any questions online, we can take that. So who takes the mic, just please say your name, and then you can ask the question. Good. Manoj, can you just, I'll stop sharing. Oh, I got it. Manoj, can you come? Okay, you please say your name and then the question. Can you just please? Oh, okay, thank you. Okay.
Pranam Maharaj, I am Shomapal Chaudhuri. I wish to ask you a question on that. The only living entity in this universe of death, does it have any connection with what we are studying now? And everything is a delirious manifestation. Yeah. Do we have any connection with what we are studying now? I'll put the question more systematically next time. But that the only living entity in the universe of death, that soul
in death.
In the universe of death, everything is dying after a specific time span. So in that universe of death, the only living entity.
In that universe of death, the only living entity is what?
That's what I want to, I want clarification. That is the only, okay, I'll tell you the questions more.
That's right. Okay.
Correctly.
Okay, that's right. Anyone else?
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Swamiji, I'm a student studying for competitive exam. Can you please guide me? What are the benefits of Brahma Muhurta and how can I wake up this early consistently? Well, they say the benefits of the Brahma Muhurta, I guess, is that at that time, in the early morning and also the evening time, nature becomes calm. So going back to Raja Yoga, remember last time we talked about how Swamiji said that we should have a sacred space that's only meant for meditation in our homes. And that space should be associated with spirituality, holy thought. So they say that similarly in the universe, during that, the time is also sacred. So during this time of Brahma Muhurta, according to the scriptures, that it's more easy to concentrate the mind at that time. So that association is there, so that you have to, and how to wake up this early consistently. So I should ask Godik Maharaj who's sitting, because he's quite good at that. Do you have any advice on that? How to get up early consistently? So Maharaj said to sleep at the right time consistently. And I'll add one thing, and put the mobile away. Put the mobile in a different room. And I think that that's one thing we can add, that because Swamiji mentioned that the room should be a sacred space. In modern psychology, they actually use Swamiji's language. They talk about zones. So this is one zone. My bedroom is another zone. So that zone, modern psychology calls it tight spaces of focus. So within a particular place, whatever you do in that space becomes associated with that activity. So that bed you're sleeping on, if you're always lying on that and looking at the mobile phone, it gets associated with that. So what this Robin Sharma said is that the bedroom should have one specific association. Just like an entertainment place has another specific association. In this light, Swamiji raised this question. He talked about this. Even if you go to the most holy of holy places, you call that Kashi, Amarnath, Kailash. Swamiji himself says that in that space, if you don't talk about God, but if it becomes like a tavern, then that space, it at least subjectively, it loses its spirituality. The spirituality is there, but we will not be able to access it because that tanmatra becomes associated with something else. So that's what you can do. That's one thing to, as Godik Maharaj said, go to bed early and put the mobile away and make that bedroom a tight space of focus just for sleep. Someone else says, when we sit for meditation, how do we go about going step by step? The process mentioned in the 3rd chapter. Kindly elaborate. Okay, so we'll deal with meditation next time, but what we're going to go again is just focusing, before we think about meditation, let's just worry about now just what we talked about, the yamas, niyamas, this asana. Let's try to all keep our posture straight. We should, at least since last time we see Thakur Mother Swamiji's posture, keep our posture straight, and our breathing. When we keep our posture straight, let's just practice more deep breathing, which engages the diaphragm, which leads to more oxygen in the brain. And rather than meditation right now, we'll get to meditation, but more immediate things, how do we practice this pranayama towards our emotions? If we become angry, if we get controlled by our phone, if we get controlled by what a friend or a parent has said to us, partner, spouse, how do we control our emotions? This is important because unless we get these things under control, meditation becomes quite impossible. So let's first deal with the basics, and then we'll deal with dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Next one. But we'll get to these points, the next classes we'll start to get with these point about how to do with meditation. Next one, Bimankar. Where does the human soul with its karma afflictions fit in the cycle recurring manifestations of prana? Where does the human soul fit with its karma afflictions? Well, well, we'll get more into this later on, but according to the Yoga Sutras, especially 2.13 and 2.14, they talk about this samsara chakra, and they say that when we pass away, or even when we're living, that these afflictions, what you call afflictions, they're called klesha, klishta vrittis. And how do they generate karma? Every time we react. See, this, according to the Yoga Sutras, says sati mule tat vipakaha jati ayu bhogaha. So everything in this life is basically predetermined. Our jati, our birth, our ayu, our longevity, and our bhoga, our quality of enjoyment. But according to the Yoga Sutras, the next life, what we do in this life, every breath you take, every step you make, every reaction you make, it deposits new karma. So that's the importance of pranayama, learning how to not react but respond. We have a question. Go ahead. Please, your name and then. Speak in the microphone. That's okay. So, please say something more about the super consciousness. Okay, so please explain something more. So I think that's, all of you are, that's the next stage. So, you know, in the Ashtanga Yoga, remember Yama Niyama, then the asana, we're now at pranayama, then what's next? This pratyahara, then dharana, dhyana, samadhi. So we still have a few steps to go. But I think what he was saying about the super conscious, that we'll get to. But when Swamiji just used it in this lecture, what he was talking about, that within our realm of reason, sometimes facts, experiences enter into there, which we're not able to explain through the five senses. It's something beyond the five senses. Like what Swami Vivekananda saw in Ramakrishna, that his rational mind could not explain. When he would sometimes see if Ramakrishna was breathing, no breath is coming. He employed physicians, Dr. Sharkard. Doctors could not explain this. So it's something beyond, it's something we're witnessing, but it's beyond the realm of objective perception. Okay, and why doing the pranayama comes to mind? What is the connection? So again, we'll get more into this, but just from the physiological level, and there are lots of studies which we can talk about next time, many empirical studies that show that when we deep breathe, when we keep the posture straight and we deep breathe, what happens? We breathe in oxygen, and these alveoli sacs, they take the oxygen and they bring it to the prefrontal cortex of our mind, which is the executive planning, and not the amygdala, which is the reactive part, which is the fight or flight. Then what happens? By doing deep breathing, there's studies about this, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is, what does the parasympathetic nervous system do? It brings homeostasis, uniformity to the human body, to the heart rate variability, to the breathing, to the digestion power, to the nerves. So that's the connection, okay? It makes us more able to respond rather than react. One is a physical condition and the other is a mental condition. Is he referring to, oh, this is Chetan Sarkar. Yes, one is a physical condition, activity. So, but you know, that's a good point. But what did Swamiji say? what is he saying again and again? That even according to the laws of physics, this is only just one mass of matter. The atomic theory, everything is made of atoms. In yoga, Swamiji is saying that everything is either gross or subtle or causal. These are the three states. From the gross we get to the more subtle. And what actually now happens is that people nowadays, when I was again in Harvard, they're emphasizing more and more, giving classes on the mind-body connection. Even the most up-to-date scientists, doctors there, they're talking about how the mind affects the body and how the body affects the mind. What does that mean? In our own experience, if I wake up with that, if I'm not feeling well that day, my body's not feeling well. My body feels pains and different things. Same thing, if my body is not feeling well, what happens to my mind? We can see this in our own life. So Swamiji explains it from both perspectives. The physics level as well as the spiritual level. Thank you, Swamiji. I am practicing dopamine detox, practicing abhyasa, mostly upon meditation to keep myself one-pointed. Yeah, so dopamine is an interesting thing. They emphasize dopamine detox. Does everyone know what dopamine is? It's a chemical that gets secreted in the brain. You see, the brains have billions of, I think about 68 billion nerves. And in between the nerves, now we say that the nerves fire together, they wire together. In between the nerves, there's a gap. That's called a synapse. So how does one nerve communicate with another nerve in the brain? It's through these chemicals. So dopamine is a feel-good, and cortisol is a feel-bad. It makes us more stressed. So when they talk about, say, using breath to get more relaxed, by deep breathing, by more oxygen to the brain, by activating the parasympathetic nervous system, what are we doing? It produces dopamine and serotonin. Okay. Yeah, you have to speak into the microphone because we have people. You give them the microphone. You give the microphone. Okay, just go. Sorry.
Is it related regarding awakening of Kulakundalini Shakti that comes through three nerves from our backside?
Oh, so the question is it related to the Kundalini awakening that comes through the three nerves? Actually, it's interesting that you asked that, because even though Raja Yoga is actually technically only supposed to deal with Sankhya, but he deals with lots of Advaita Vedanta, and he also does talk about the Kundalini later in Raja Yoga. So we'll get to that. So he makes some parallels, but that's a more, but I wouldn't feel comfortable in saying that this is related to that, because that's something even more subtle. So we have to use that principle Swamiji says, from the gross to the subtle. So these things we can see, the spinal cord, but the Kundalini, those cannot be perceived through the human mechanism, through the five senses. Those are things that can only be experienced as we make our minds more subtle and our minds more pure. Okay, I think that's the last question. So thank you all for the questions, and we'll take off. We'll start again. I think the next talk will be then fall Saturdays. Anyways, 2 Saturdays from now. So you can read that. You can read it ahead of time if you like, because this is a class that we can. I like questions, or if we can discussions, if we can read it ahead of time and just think about it, how it's relatable. If any of you are physicists or scientists, what do you have to say about it? And just I want to conclude with that. This is an idea for all of us. Rather than just quoting Swami Vivekananda, I think it's more what we've seen today with Swami Vivekananda, his line of reasoning. How he can speak to each different group in their own language, and he keeps up to date in the different disciplines. That's quite amazing. And that's why he's Swamiji. In spite of his vast range of spiritual experiences, he always speaks to everyone at their own levels. Just one thing before we close. I remember this one Deepak Chopra. I don't know how many of you heard of him. He's like a spiritual guru, scientist guru. He went to Caltech, and gave a talk to many physicists there at Caltech, which is one of the leading universities in the entire world. You know what they did though? They called that woo-woo, which means like, woo means what? Like something made up in your own mind. Because what Deepak Chopra is talking about, what he's saying is not wrong. He's talking about Vedanta, but he's not speaking to them in their own language. He's speaking about esoteric things. But you see the difference with Swamiji. He's had all up to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, but he knows all the different doctrines, all the different things. So I think I really loved seeing the way he thinks. And I think if we can try to adopt that in our own life, the logical procession, and trying to speak with everyone at that level, not top down, but at the level of the person. That's all. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. That's all.